technology is fundamentally neutral. It can be used for good. It can be used for bad. It's our job to be shaping them as forces for good.
I am here with Pat Gelsinger, who has had one of the most legendary tech careers in the world, really. Came from a farm in Pennsylvania to work for Intel at a very young age, had a career that was just an enviable career there in and of itself before he was called away to lead various other ventures, including CEO of VMware, where Glassdoor named him the #1 CEO in America. If you've heard of things like thumb drives and net neutrality, Pat Gelsinger has had a hand in these things. He was called back to Intel to be CEO and is now working on many different things, some of which we're going to talk about today. So welcome, Pat.
Hey, thank you. Pleasure to be here. And George Fox is a place close to my heart.
Yeah.
One of our daughters, one of our daughter-in-laws graduated from here with their master's in education. So love coming back to GFU.
We're so proud and we're so happy to have you here. Has this past 5 years been the wildest 5 years or so we've seen in the tech industry? Like, what a crazy time to be alive in tech. Or have you seen a stranger time in your career?
This is pretty epic. And when you think about COVID, right, coming off of COVID, in many aspects of technology, we sort of called it the COVID high, sort of like a sugar high, where everything needs to go online and, all the implications of that. And sort of, just at the moment you're getting over COVID, right? And you're starting to get some normalcy, supply chains and what I was super involved with CHIPS Act and semiconductor and manufacturing rebalancing, and then Gen AI, right? And this, 55-year, right, AI thing, right, that went through multiple AI winters has just exploded. And I sort of think of that like the internet, right? Where, I remember the first time I went on the internet.
Oh, do you? With the dial-up, like the modem and the ringing and all that
we
stuff?
were a big business, so we actually had a switch network access to the backbone. But I went on the internet on Tuesday.
Wow.
And I think I had time to do it again on Friday.
Yes.
Oh, it was like a holy moment. And now if you kept your teenager off the internet for 10 seconds, you have ruined their very existence.
Right.
And AI is going to be the same way. It's going to have that kind of dramatic reshaping of the technology landscape, how we use and interact with technology. So all of that together and then throw in a little bit of geopolitics. Yeah, this is a pretty wild time to be alive.
You think AI is going to be that big? Because I know some people are saying things like, there's a plateau and there's a hype cycle and there are companies making money on this. And so obviously they want it to be bigger than it is. Like, what's your attitude about how serious things are going to get with AI?
Oh, I think, like the internet, it will redefine human experience.
Wow.
And in many regards, I believe that it will be bigger than the internet was on the interactions. And a couple of aspects to that. One is essentially we humans have been adjusting to machines since the beginning of computing. With AI, machines are now adjusting to us. Right? Where they see us, they hear us, we're responding to them in our language as opposed to their language. And, crossing that Rubicon, if you could, of user interface really makes it available for everybody, right? In that sense. If you can talk to a computer, okay, it can start doing things on your behalf. So I do see it that pervasive. Obviously, every one of these technology waves build on each other. So the market's getting bigger connectivity brings more people into the social and technological context.
Right.
So AI is the biggest one, but hey, after that, I see it as the next one, and we're working on quantum computing. So we're far from done, and technology implications. We have 2 decades in front of us for AI, but even before that finishes, we'll be well into the quantum generation.
I have a question that I've been embarrassed to ask, and I can read a Wikipedia article, but I feel like, for our audience, which is all kinds of people from all kinds of backgrounds, I just want to ask you, what is quantum computing? How would you describe it to somebody who doesn't know anything about computers but is interested in technology, probably has heard of it, probably has some sense that it's like computers that are really fast?
Well, first, you've seen images of quantum computers. So let's give a little bit of I'll say the hard tech aspect first. And you've seen these big like chandeliers, right, images and so on. All that is a refrigerator. There's a little qubit at the bottom of it, at that refrigerator.
Keeping it cool.
Keeping it cold. And it's not like keeping it cool, it's keeping it cold.
Like really cold.
Yeah. You are within 1 to 5 degrees of absolute zero.
Oh.
So cryogenic temperatures, as they're referred to. So, all of the quantum effects, whether they're lights, whether they're single electron effects, whether they're superconductors, they're all happening close to absolute zero. So first thing, you're building these big, super cold environments, for them. And then you're creating quantum effects, right? Literally the spin of an electron could become a qubit. And instead of having a digit or a bit, as we refer to it in classic computing, you're creating a qubit. And a qubit is essentially the single digit of quantum computing. Now, the magic of that is that a single digit, right, in classical computing can be a 0 or a 1. In quantum computing, it can take on many states and it can be entangled with other qubits. Right?
Oh, entanglement. I've heard that as a quantum term.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. So now I can get this exponentially larger state space, based on multiple qubits being entangled with each other. So now, why does any of that care? So, it's like this really cool, geeky kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of problems that can be solved in the digital domain, but many problems that will never be solved in the digital domain, right? They're essentially quantum effects that need a quantum computer to simulate them. And, those are the kind of problems that are going to become possible with quantum effects. And, some of the problems that we can solve in the quantum space, maybe it'll take me a day on a quantum computer. It might take me 1 billion years to solve that same equation on a digital or AI computer. And that's why this is like so breathtaking, because problems that are not computational today in classical computing, ones and zeros, will become computationally possible on quantum or qubit machines. Wow. And that's what gets us excited about it. And there's aspects of human genes that we're not going to be able to solve, areas like proteins and how they're formed and managed. There's material science that we're not going to be able to solve short of quantum computing. We're going to be able to make new discoveries around complex materials and effects that aren't possible today. We're going to be able to, essentially identify, in different domains where today we might have looked at, 100 versions of magnets. There's 10,000 versions possible. Right? And magnets, of course, are going to have huge implications on electric vehicles and energy generation, being able to fully look at biological effects. Today we're sort of shooting in the dark. I gave this to a rat. It didn't respond negatively. Let's try it on the human.
Yeah.
I'm going to simulate them all on a quantum computer, and I'm going to pick the right ones, not guess like we have in the past. So it's going to be a thrilling time. And I call it, the trinity of computing, where I'll have classical computing, I'll have AI computing, and quantum computing all working together. And I think that's this next phase as we move past the couple of decades of AI, when all of that comes together, and we're going to be able to solve problems that have never been solvable before.
Yeah, we're just living in these wild times. Now, when you were talking about your first experience with the internet, you talked about it like a holy moment almost, and you used this term Trinity just now. And so I think this is a nice segue to just ask you about some of the spiritual and religious dimensions of all this. I know in the tech world and for CEOs, you've been something of an odd creature, maybe to some people, an openly committed Christian who's been at the highest levels of the tech world. How do you think about this as a Christian? Like, Christians have so many views about technology. Some Christians seem almost, as Christians, anti-technology in a sense. Like, what's your take on faith and the technology world in the near future?
Yeah, and this question alone, we could probably go spend the next 2 hours on, and so we'll try to be.
Let's do it, or the next 20 minutes. Yeah.
It really is, to me, first thing, if you've accepted Christ, okay, you're a full-time minister. Mm-hmm. A few of us are called to vocational ministry. The rest of us are called to full-time ministry in the workplace, in the school place, in the marketplace. We're all called, to be disciples, to be ambassadors, to be ministers. So then the question is, okay, I'm a full-time Christian, but I am a geeky technologist. If you haven't started to get that
I've started to get the idea of that maybe with the quantum computing description. Yes.
Yeah, I am just thrilled by technology. And when we think about, like, let's say generative AI, when the first large language models and, the understanding of how we could, simulate this aspect of brain behavior, when that paper was first published, was God surprised? No, he wasn't surprised. He put that creative imagination into us. He's the one who created the 20-watt human brain, compared to the half a gigawatt training farm for AI, right? He was the great creator. And we are created in his image, in his likeness. And if we're in God's image, then he's created us as creators, as imaginative beings, as curious beings who want to find, discover. But it's not like there's new science here. We're just discovering what God put there, right? And to me, in that sense, a Christian technologist, we're just like better detectives, right? Because we're looking for the grandness of his design as we go about doing our work. Now, some have said, hey, they're, opposing each other. Hey, I believe in, evolutionary science, right? Boy, why couldn't God have done that?
Yeah.
Right? Why couldn't have he used those approaches? I don't think there's any surprises here to God, and I don't think he's ready to, or opposed to taking on any hard questions that we might, put at God and challenge him or question him with. And also, it's extraordinary that most Nobel laureates, right? 70-ish% of Nobel laureates claim faith as one of their most important characteristics.
Wow.
Right? As you look over time. So I sort of joke now and then that if you want to win a Nobel laureate, first thing is be a person of faith, right? You just improved your odds, right? So I don't think God's surprised, and I don't think he's bothered at all for technologists to inquire of him.
Such a refreshing perspective, I think, for academics to hear, like myself, but also just people who are curious and who see these tools and are just looking for direction. I wonder, though, if I can ask, surely in this journey that you're taking, even with some of your new ventures in AI for faith communities, which we can talk about in a moment, some people must have come at you with this, what's it called, like a doomer mentality? Like we're basically humanity's putting itself existentially at risk. I take it just from the way that you're talking about this and the positivity that you don't believe that, or you believe if that's possible, if there's something we can do about that. What's your take on the probability of this doomer, this extinction idea around AI?
Well, first I would look back over history, and really, those who don't study history are doomed to repeat it, kind of mantra. And technology is fundamentally neutral. It can be used for good. It can be used for bad. Right? Roman roads, hey, were used for conquest. They were also used to let the gospel go out. Right? The printing press, right? It was used for printing Bibles that became the educational materials that resulted in fundamentally the Renaissance, right? In the greatest period of learning in human history. And over again, we've seen technology breakthroughs used for good, but also used not for good. It's our job to be shaping them as forces for good over and over again. And every one of those breakthroughs, you remember when you first put a cell phone, oh man, it's going to fry your brain, right? When we first watched the TV, oh my, the first calculator, oh, people aren't going to be able to do math anymore. Just over and over again, right? We've seen those perspectives that it has destructive characteristics, and some of them are. Right, the first nuclear bomb or atomic bomb, but it also ushered in new forms of energy, new forms of understanding of materials as well. And I think it's our job to embrace them, to use them, to be shaping them as a force for good. And we see that over and over again through history. And I don't believe that there's some super AGI or some super intelligence that's going to eliminate humanity. But I do think there's risk for any technology if it's not properly managed and used. And imagine that you and I come up with a great invention tomorrow. We'll call it the Fox, right? For George Fox, great invention, but it has some bad side effects, right? And we're going to put it into our cars or into our drugs or into our social networks or into some other aspect. It has some really bad side effects. I would argue the engineering isn't done. The Fox is not ready for release into the market. And we're familiar with that. We do drug testing.
Right.
Okay, if the side effects aren't appropriate or manageable, then you don't release the drug, right? And that's the way I think it is with any technology. As we look at it coming into society, we must make sure that we understand it, that we've engineered it, that we're using it in the right ways. And if it's not good, then we're not done with the engineering yet. We got more work to do until it's ready to go forward. And in some cases, maybe some of the AI systems will need that same additional engineering for it to be ready.
Yeah. I know one project you're working on this year and excited to work on is a group called Gloo, spelled Gloo. We'll put a link to it down below, as well as some other things that we're referring to here. Tell us about Gloo. What is this work? What is the AI angle there? And what's the faith perspective there?
Yeah, and generally Gloo is a platform for the faith and flourishing ecosystem.
Platform, okay.
Right? We'll just say, hey, if you want to be a cloud, right? If you want to run SaaS services, if you want to run your church, if you're a parachurch ministry, hey, we want you to be on Gloo. Why is that? We want to have the best technology used for the faith and flourishing ecosystem. I somewhat joke that some churches, their high form of technology is Windows 95 under Ethel's desk running the church directory.
That's right.
That's not good.
Ethel runs a lot of things in churches.
Yeah, and we want to, elevate that technology profile so that we make churches better, that we make parachurches better, that we make faith and flourishing, better. Yeah. We want to be bringing the latest and best technology to those communities to make them more effective.
Can I ask, before you continue, do you have a sense that churches are a little bit hesitant to adopt new technologies, or why are churches run in that way?
I think part of it, of course, is, there is this hesitance, the technology are good or bad, right? So there's sort of this natural, I'm a little bit reluctant. I'm a little bit hesitant in that respect. I also think in that regard, we haven't done a good job of giving good tech to the church, and there's a sort of this, view of, right, secular and church, don't
use too many of the devil's tools in the holy place kind of idea.
Right.
Yeah.
Remember, I come from rural Pennsylvania, Amish, Mennonites, Pennsylvania Dutch, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right. So, 1867, I think, was the last piece of technology entering the Amish community, right, in that respect. So very familiar with some of those perspectives. But we've also seen God's not afraid of tech. The Bible, the printing press, right? Language, education, almost every form of, health, wellness, and hospital has a basis in the faith community, caring for, improving quality of life for every human on the planet. So God's not afraid of this. He created this. We're just discovering what he created, in humanity. So, I really do see this opportunity for leading technologists to jump across and say, we're going to have the best tech available for faith and flourishing. But also that we're going to be making sure the technology is good. Right. And with it, when you ask your large language model, your chat, right, of choice, whatever bot you're using right now, tell me about God. How do you want it to respond? Tell me about human relationship. Tell me about bullying in school.
Right.
Tell me, about sexuality. How do you want it to respond?
And if you ask now, a lot of what those things will do, like if you ask ChatGPT, like, tell me about God, what should I believe about God? It's basically going to just reposition and say, people believe many things about God. And
right, because,
what else are they going to do, I guess?
Yeah, it's trained on, the broad corpus of social data, right? Which is very, has a certain perspective associated with it. Well, we want to make sure at Gloo that we give a proper faith, flourishing, and values perspective on those questions. Has to be good tech, right? Has to be proven technology. There's work being released on human flourishing. What are the dimensions of human flourishing? We want to create AI models that are transparent, that are values-based, that are benchmarked, right, appropriately. So that when your church is running a certain capability, we want you to use AI that's trusted, right? That you're just going to be able to say, okay, yeah, I can use that in my church because I know, right, it's being done and used. And in many respects, I think of what we can do in the tech community. The problem with many AI models today is there is no source of truth, right? There's just a general probabilistic view of how most people would answer a question, right? Well, we have absolute truth. that we base our faith on. And that gives us a superpower, right? Because we can truly say, okay, what is God's perspective on that question? And again, we don't see that as the singular view of AI and large language models, but the community to have a trusted source of AI and services so that they start to build their church environment, their parachurch environment, the social communities that they're building for support groups or for AA groups, et cetera. We want them grounded in truth and values. Our hospitals, we want them to be making decisions that are appropriate to value of human life, not based on probabilistically, saying, well, do I have too many humans on Earth and as a result, I want less sick humans? No, we are absolutely committed to flourishing in wellness and health and relationship. And that's what we want to represent through our AI systems that we deliver. And we want to also influence the broader community. We want benchmarks on human flourishing.
Yeah.
Right? And those benchmarks, we wanted to run with OpenAI, with Copilot, with Claude, with Genesis, with all of the models to say, okay, your first token latency was this, right? You were able to do this many simultaneous conversations, and your benchmark score on the flourishing benchmark was this.
Yeah.
Right? And we want that to be just as representative of a good model for those that we do at Gloo, as well as all of those in the broader community as well.
Yeah. I hear your excitement for the Gloo project. I wonder if you think, notwithstanding the efforts that you're literally doing now, do you think Christians have been sitting out on this AI question so far?
Well, let's look at history for a second. And if we go back to the social networks, are social networks good or bad for humanity?
I've had it both ways personally.
And there's an algorithm that's driven by finances, click time. It isn't saying that was good for that teenager.
Right.
Right? It's just saying, hey, I got more advertising dollars and I got more eyeballs for longer. The sole metrics associated with this ad.
Right.
And, even many of the social networks' own results give very mixed answers on whether the people on their platform are better or worse humans, better or worse values, right? Improve livelihoods as a result. We in the faith and flourishing community, we didn't show up for that discussion, right? And today we look and say, is social networking good or bad? Generally, technology is neutral. We have to shape it for good. And in this case, I'll say we didn't show up, we didn't influence, we didn't demand the algorithms to improve human flourishing. AI, way more important.
Yeah.
Because literally, the values, right? The results are embedded in the underlying models. And I do believe that we want to make sure that our values as humans are properly weighted and understood as part of those. And you might have different perspectives on certain theological perspectives. And hey, we want the system to respond, appropriately. Oh, you're a Catholic. Okay, let's make sure we give a good Catholic answer to that. Oh, you're a Southern Baptist. Well, hey, let's make sure, or Methodist or, different views, or Islamic, or, other views. But the values underlying those are amazingly similar. Even when we might have refinements in certain theological domains associated with them. And there's a body of work, that's soon to be released around human flourishing, a many-year study, right? Papers and, good scientific data. And we want those represented well inside of the AI systems of the future.
Yeah, I was going to ask. I'm glad you brought that up because I think a lot of people, if they heard about a project to create a very faith-infused LLM or just network of AI tools and things, they might wonder within Christianity, there are a lot of different perspectives. And I mean, maybe part of the answer that I could hear emerging is that you could have transparency and citation, maybe even represented. I know some models do this, like Perplexity's deep research model will now link a source for things. And so you get a sense of where it's coming from. But also there's a sense you want real people to use this, right? And they have to give feedback too.
Yeah. So we expect good feedback systems, We have a trust council we're setting up for Gloo that will be getting and reviewing those feedback mechanisms as well. Open source, so that you'll be able to go say, oh, what do they train on, right?
Yeah.
What are the model weights?
Yeah.
So good transparency in the systems themselves. The benchmarks will be the benchmarks, right? We're going to release them. These are the questions. These are responses. This is how we've done.
Not hiding it or anything like that.
But then also the RAG systems and contextualization, allows us, oh, you're a Catholic. Okay, let's give you, we're not going to hide the fact that we start from a Christian perspective or Judeo-Christian value, perspective. That's sort of home base for us. But if, we know that you're of a Catholic or a Judaism or, whatever faith tradition, then RAG systems allow us to give that context and prompts, appropriate to your faith traditions. Just like, hey, if you're, a young mom, hey, you're going to get Pampers ads, right? Well, here, if you're a young Jewish mother, okay, we're going to make sure that, we give the perspectives appropriate. If we don't know, we know what home base is. But we're also going to say, as we do know more context, we'll be appropriately representing your faith perspectives as part of that as well.
Yeah, that's really fascinating to see where that's going to go and just to see how all this is going to develop. We're talking about heavy things here, serious things, good and evil, faith. I mean, the future of the world. I wonder, when people think about tech and tech CEOs, I know there's just like an image of that there must be something like sinister going on. Like I think even of that iconic image of the tech CEOs behind the president at the inauguration, regardless of what one thinks politically and so on. I just saw that and I was like, wow, that's like an iconic image. And I don't know, like how throughout your career, how did you inject your faith into your role as a CEO? How did you manage being a person of faith in environments that are fundamentally, maybe pragmatically secular environments? How does that even work?
Yeah. And, in a lot of senses, I was never embarrassed about my faith, being very public on it. There's many of the CEOs of some of the most visible CEOs. Hey, I know they've had a gospel presentation.
Really?
Because I gave it to them.
Really?
Yeah. In one-on-one settings and other opportunities.
How does that, I mean, I know without revealing, specific things, but like, how does that go? How is it received? What do they say?
Well, a couple of them have been successful. Right, been able to lead, several leaders to Christ, and in other cases, they respect my faith perspectives, and they're on their own values journey as part of it. And some, have chosen, different routes. And later in life, people often look at spirituality and faith in a different lens than when they were in the height of their career.
Right.
But I've also been able to build relationships with many of them where, hey, I know who their kids are. I know their health challenges. I know, right? One of them had a son pass away. And they said, "You were the first person to call." Right? And they know that my faith matters to me and how I care about them and their families as well. But a lot of it, as well as a leader of a large organization, you got diverse views. Right?
Always,
highly diverse. And you have to be extraordinarily respectful of different faith perspectives. I had a gay man who was afraid to come and present to me because he knew of my deep Christian beliefs. I apologized to him. I apologized to the entire company for him.
Wow. Because
if I wasn't making him comfortable to be part of my team, then I probably was making other people not comfortable to be part of my team. And in that, hey, the more engaging, the more inquisitive I am of other faith traditions and other value perspectives, the more I get to be representative of mine. Right, in it. And, against that, I think it's, done with a winsome inquisitiveness. You actually unleash extraordinary energy across your team. I think differently than Pat does, but he's like one of the first people that asked me about my faith tradition ever, right? And, for that, I want to know them on a deeper level, than others might. And it becomes very empowering when you do it with a winsome curiosity.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. I wonder, as we close here, as you think about this chapter in your life, in your career, I don't know, do you feel like you're just out there on the open road, like on a motorcycle, just with all these possibilities, or like I don't know, how are you looking at this chapter in your life?
Well, I'm at a place where I wasn't expecting to be at this point. But I've had 45 years in technology. I'm in my 60s now. 45 years. It's just like it's just been extraordinary.
Yeah.
My only regret is I'm not 20 years younger.
Yeah.
Right. There's just so many wonderful things going on that a technologist gets to participate in at this point. And, given that corpus of experiences, that set of relationships, and now, what we're doing at Playground, I get to participate in some of the deepest tech things going on in the world today, quantum computing, new light sources, new material structures, superconducting, things that are just like, we are out there, right, for it. And I get to participate in those.
Yeah.
But I also get to bring the two pillars of my life together, faith and tech. And works like our philanthropies, but through platforms like Gloo, really to work to enable the faith ecosystem with the best tech so that they can execute their missions more effectively to the glory of God.
Pat, thanks for talking with us here, not just about deep tech things, but also about deep human things and deep faith things. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.